Chapter 19. Meeting the Band. The book has a sweet picture from the artist of this book, Peter Sharon. And it's, you should look at the art. Hey, you know what? I should put it on the video on the YouTube. Okay, yeah, I'll do that. So, meeting the band, look at the picture, look at that shit in his hand, gnarly. Get ready to think about that. Possibly ingest it. Okay. On the second day, Elle, Perry, and Tony took Fozzie for a morning walk. To bathe, fish, get high. Not necessarily in that order. After they finished their business, packing up to head back to camp, and Perry saw something on the other side of the river. It looked like an old abandoned outhouse or something. He hadn't seen anything like that out here in the Elosa forest. That alone was worth investigating. The river was pretty easy to cross, but they did have to swim. Everyone left their stuff on the side of the river except Tony. He swam holding his Glock above his head. Fozzie swam uncomfortably. She looked like a surface submarine, mostly submerged, gliding uneasily through the water. The outhouse was mostly destroyed. You couldn't even tell it was an outhouse. It looked more like a cluster of broken wooden planks sticking into the ground. Grass was growing around and inside it. They looked inside. There was a tiny hole in the center. "Ha! The shithole's still there," Perry said, smiling, pointing at the tiny hole. As he was pointing at the hole, and they were all looking, a tiny puff of smoke rose from the hole. "What the fuck?" Perry stepped back cautiously, then slowly leaned forward and began sniffing. His eyes perked up. "That's weed!" Perry clawed at the hole. The fragile surface broke apart and fell easily to the ground below. It was about a 6 or 7 foot drop, but the ground below looked like a layer of crap. They couldn't tell if it was hard or not, but there was a faint smell of pot. "Oh, I'm going." Perry had accepted a side quest, and he was determined to complete it. "We could get Fozzie out if we take her down there, right?" Elle asked. Yeah, man, we could just throw her," Perry said. "We're not throwing her," Elle told him. "We can get out of here if we need, Elle. Don't worry," Tony reassured her. "Should we bring her, though?" "We're not leaving her behind," Elle demanded. The small hole opened easily, but only to a small, roughly 1 foot opening. The dirt got hard and it wasn't easy to clear. Perry tried to wiggle in face first, but he wouldn't fit through the hole. As he tried to squirm through it, he thought of all the crap that must have passed through the hole before him. He gagged. "You're like a big turd clogging the porta potty," Tony joked. They watched his ass wiggle and try to squirm in. Perry had to kick the ground to make the hole bigger and almost fell in doing so. After some effort, he was able to slip through and hang from the lip of the hole, dangling above the old pile of shit or something. Perry sniffed. "Doesn't smell like shit," he thought to himself out loud. As gracefully as he could, he dropped down onto the old pile of shit. As he landed, his first thought was that it could hold him. But a millisecond later, he felt the top layer give way and he squished knee-deep into the dark, Three Musketeer-like layer below. It was shit. His hands fell to brace him. They only cracked the hard layer of the brown shit pool. He was quickly able to pull himself sideways and scramble to solid ground. He was only wearing shorts to begin with, but now his shorts were saturated in Three Musketeers shit. Waist and elbows down, he was covered in someone else's fucking diarrhea. Oh! Elle and Tony both looked away in disgust, then quickly looked back. not wanting to miss anything hilarious that was about to happen. The ripe smell was unleashed when Perry broke the seal, and Perry was quickly overcome. He gagged again and again. The smell left the hole. Elle turned and gagged and fucking threw up. Down in the hole, he tried not to throw up. Perry decided his best action would be to take off his shorts, socks, and shoes and leave them. It was the quickest way for him to leave the scene of the crime and never be reminded of it again. Facing the world in his underwear was way easier than facing the world with his bottom half dipped in a shit sundae. Plus, who knows what's down here? He smelled pot. He may not need to smell like the diarrhea of 50 people. It didn't matter now. He was still going to look like a guy in his underwear, covered in diarrhea of 30 people. 50 people. He took the lighter out of his shorts pocket and looked down the long tunnel. It was the only way out of this Three Musketeers shithole. From where Tony and Elle were, there was no easy way to get to the edge where Perry was without falling into the pile of shit. Tony jumped in and bounced his way out as quickly as possible, legs covered in the Three Musketeers diarrhea of 50 people. Elle looked like she wasn't going to be able to handle it. But after she dropped Fozzie into Tony's arms and was the only one not in the shithole, she went for it. The tunnel leading out of the shithole was a tight fit. Almost as tight as when Bishop had to climb through the duct in Aliens. A little more room than that, but close. And it was completely dark. Perry needed to see, but didn't want to be seen, so he flicked the lighter every few seconds. Tony, Elle, and Fozzie took up the rear in near complete darkness, waiting for Perry's flick to give them a sense of where they were. The tunnel went about 50 feet and then turned 90 degrees. Then it went another 50 feet and then opened to a small chamber. When they got into the chamber, they were able to sit up for a bit and decided to assess the situation. The hole going forward was about the same diameter as the one they came through, but this one was sloped downwards. "Oh man, only traps have small tunnels that slope downward," Perry said, remembering how many times he'd been killed by traps playing Dungeons and Dragons. They decided to go on anyways. This tunnel went farther and was steep enough that it was a little scary, and they thought about turning around, but once you commit down that hill, you can't turn around. Perry kept communicating, letting the group know of changes and when to hang on. If one of them slipped behind him, it would cause an avalanche, and they would be falling into the unknown. Then they came to another chamber. In this chamber, he could feel the earth thumping a little, and there was enough smoke for him to smell it better. His nose and eyes perked up immediately again as his brain recognized the smell. Wait, that's not just weed. That's good-ass weed. All of a sudden, this journey seemed a lot less dangerous. Enthusiastically now, Perry made his way deeper into the tunnel. The group followed. After another while of shimmying, he paused. The thumping sounded like drums and bass. It was starting. Someone was playing loud rock music in front of him. His brain thought, what the fuck? And his body said, what the fuck kind of rock and roll weed party am I missing out on? They made it to another chamber. The music was louder now. This chamber was at a point where they could make out distorted guitar and a singer. As Elle wiggled in after Fozzie, bringing up the rear, she had a strange look on her face. "Oh, I know that song," she said. She started headbanging a little. "It's Damn That River by Alice in Chains!" Holy crap, it was, Tony thought. Perry scurried into the tunnel, this time with more enthusiasm. Weed and metal, probably a good sign. The tunnel went pretty far and turned again. Then looking down the next tunnel, it went down diagonally, at an angle he knew he couldn't hold on without sliding. The music was loud now. It must be in the next room. In his mind, he said, "Sometimes you just gotta say fuck it." Risky business reference. And he looked at Elle and Tony before sliding face first down the tunnel with a big-ass smile on his face like he was about to meet Snoop Dogg. He plopped into a well-lit room. It was as loud as being next to a giant speaker at a rock show. There was a band playing in front of him. Quickly, Tony fell out of the hole and onto him, Fozzie in tow and Elle right behind that. They tumbled in and fell like they were the Four Stooges. The music stopped. In front of them was a pretty standard rock practice room. Except holding the instruments were a bunch of different monkeys and apes. Perry, Elle, Tony, and Fozzie were frozen in shock. The singer was a chimpanzee. The best way to describe him was Axl Rose in the Use Your Illusion days. Bandana with long flowing hair out the back, leather jacket, sunglasses indoors, bottle of Jack next to him. The guitarist was smaller and a spider monkey look. To describe his look, compared to a rock star, would have to be Jimi Hendrix. Bandana strapped across his puffy afro, frilly hippie clothes with wild colors, round sunglasses. He even had a miniature spider monkey guitar. On drums was a big-ass baboon. He really didn't look like any famous rock star, but he did have a strange bowl cut that made him look like Keith Moon. He had long, powerful baboon arms that looked like they were made for drumming. He was sitting on a pile of pillows, fan blowing in his face and his baboon ass. His drum set was ready for metal, double bass and everything. He snorted and flipped his stick up in the air, spinning it quickly and grabbing it with his opposite hand. On bass was a really big-ass silverback gorilla. He also didn't really resemble any famous rock star, but he did have the feel of a bass player. Laid back and grooving. He had a giant joint in his mouth. He put down his bass and kind of nonchalantly picked up a big ball and chain and raised it over his head like he was going to pound Perry with it. "No, wait," Axl said. It talked. The chimpanzee talked. The humans looked at each other, speechless. Axl spoke again. "They're different." "Not clones?" the gorilla asked. "No, man, no. Not clones," Perry interjected. "We're real humans, man." He paused, but didn't think his response was good enough. Man, I smelled weed, man. I love weed." The band looked at each other, questioning. Then smiles grew on their faces, and they all started laughing. Elle stood up, amazed, and walked towards the band. "They can talk?" she said, almost questioning. Jimmy mimicked her, pointing at the humans. "They can talk." Elle said, "Damn that river!" The band looked at each other. They were surprised. Yeah," Axl said, puzzled. "How'd you know that?" "Dirt! We love that album," Elle said, pointing to her friends. "We saw Alice in Chains on tour like 8 times." Tony pointed out, 9 times. Remember Lollapalooza? The monkeys and apes looked at each other. They were shocked. Axl lowered his sunglasses like a rock star and looked over the top at her. "Shut up." "Hey, man, we love metal," Tony explained. "We're from outside the forest, the other side of the fence. Do you know what I'm talking about?" They all looked at each other like they had heard of the fence, but it may be a rumor or legend or something. "You've been to the fence?" "Yeah, man, yeah. We used to live on the other side," Tony said. Where are you guys from?" Elle asked. Axl replied, "Here, man, from here, Earth." Perry jumped in. Yeah, hey, what's up, man? We're all from Earth. We love rock music? Fuck yeah! Pass that J my way, gorilla man! The gorilla passed the joint to Perry. My name is Les, Les said. Perry indulged. The room was like a crazy rock and metal fan room. Rage Against the Machine seemed to have the most posters. Tool, Alice in Chains, Faith No More, Primus posters all lined the walls. Beer cans and booze bottles were laying everywhere. Long, unemptied ashtrays filled with roaches, no cigarettes. It was a 90s grunge and metalhead sweet rock and roll museum. In a few places there looked to be dirt thrown at the walls. Perry hoped it wasn't poop. Perry passed the doochie on the left-hand side and it went around the room. The primates bonded over heavy metal. All the monkeys and apes had similar experiences to clones. They didn't remember ever not being in the forest. Some had been here a long time. The band laid out the story for the group. Losa was trying highly experimental cloning techniques, and instead of killing or storing the extra or wasted clones, they let them loose in the forest and observed what happens. That's who the clones were. Reject and used, unneeded clones. Is that what you guys are too? Perry said very rudely. Do I look like a reject human? Axel said and held up his hand, showing off his thumbs. Their thumbs were close to their fingers like humans. They all had them. Not to mention the talking, Moon, the drummer, said. Some of our forefathers escaped, started the society, mostly underground and in the trees, Jimmy added. We're winning, Axel added. Winning what? Tony asked. War with the company, Axel said. Elosa? Oh, there's a war? Perry asked. The band nodded like, these people don't know of this war? The group of humans told them stories of the outside. They were amazed. They told the band about humans, about bad humans and good humans. They told them stories about metal shows. The band loved the story of Tony, Elle, and Perry going to Lollapalooza and taking way too much acid. They wanted more details about Rage Against the Machine. They ended up talking about war stores and the first sale. War stores! The apes looked at each other. New, big machines, easy to kill. Tony questioned, easy to kill? What, you killed one? No, we break. Steel machine. We kill another soon, easy. Tony questioned, okay. What about the tall building? Have you been there? Les, the bassist, stated, we come from there. Axel continued, that war we fight. We raid building many times, freeing the brothers and sisters. We can help. Tony pulled a Glock out of his underwear and showed it to them. They were amazed. Oh, we take humans to King, Elle was asking Axel. Axel looked back and forth. Is it cool enough? You do the worm. The as yet to be named. What do you mean as yet to be named drummer? It's Moon. No, his name's Moon. What is this shit? Moon, the drummer said, and handed a see-through plastic bottle to Axel, who passed it up towards the group. It looked like a 2-liter bottle of soda with the top ripped off. Inside were all white centipede-looking creatures, squirming around. Some were an inch or two long, and some were around 6 inches and fat ass. They weaved through each other inside the bottle, a milky-looking weave of centipedes. "What is that shit?" Perry asked. "Strong drug," Les said, holding out the bottle. "Wait, strong drug?" Oh, Perry grabbed it. That's all he needed to know. "What kind of drug?" He looked deeply at the worms swarming around. He picked one out and held it over his mouth. Do I just eat it or what?" The band laughed. "Ha ha ha! Pussy way!" Axel said, "Snort!" Normally that would be all Perry would need. But snorting a wiggling, living thing this large was new to him and weirded him out. He put it up to his nose. "Bigger," Les the drummer told him. Perry didn't back down. He reached back into the bag and grabbed one of the biggest worms, looked over at Tony and Al, and dangled it in front of his nose. He held his other nostril closed with his other hand as the centipede legs reached and touched his open nostril. The worm slid up close, each ridge of his body pumping along the way. Perry almost couldn't get it in with one snort, but he reached and found more breath and snorted it up. It disappeared in his nose. The tip of his nostril was stretched out, and it shrunk as the last of the worm's body sunk into his skull. He almost coughed. His eyes watered. He looked at the ground, his face showing that he was feeling the worm in his head. The monkeys rolled with laughter. "Yes!" Jimmy yelled in a high-pitched voice. "Oh, you a big ball!" Perry smiled at everyone, looking over at Tony, and then his eyes glazed over, and he seemed to be looking right through Tony. Sitting there, wearing his shitty underwear, looking completely out of it, Perry resembled a really high hobo. He held his arms out and put his hands flat on the ground. It looked like he needed to do that to keep his balance or not fall off the planet. He was high as fuck instantly. His head moved and drool slipped out of his mouth. He wasn't unconscious, but he wasn't quite there. Perry held his hand out in front of his face and drew in air. "You gotta try it, man." "You took too much, man. Too much, too much," Axel said, and all the apes laughed. "What?" Elle looked scared. "Nah, he's quoting Fear and Loathing," Tony assured Elle. "Give me one." Les passed the bottle of worms to Tony. Tony took one, not as big as Perry's, but big compared to the other bottle. "Save at least 3 big ones for me, Les, and Moon," Axel said. Tony shuffled around the worms and looked for the 4th biggest one. He picked it out and snorted it. It was tough to get down, but he got it. He felt the worm wiggling in his sinuses. "Oh, you a big ball too!" Jimmy said and laughed. After a few short but long seconds, Tony felt a wave overcome him, weighing down his eyes and filling his soul with euphoria. It was like acid, salvia, and speed all coming on at the same time. He almost wanted to get up and run, but he was way too comfortable. He laid down, and colors swarmed in front of his eyes. He watched sound bounce off the walls as the monkeys and apes and Elle talked incoherently to him. The room became a painting, a still wet, animated painting. He reached out and pushed his hands across the painting, and the colors mixed. Shapes swirled around his hand. The painting melted into a psychedelic spray of rainbow particles. and now he was flying through space. He closed his eyes and relaxed and let the show wash over him. He vividly remembered good times before the craziness.